The leather-bound diary fell from the shelf with a soft thud, landing at Jack Vandermeer's dusty boots as he reached for a can of peaches on the top shelf of Dylan's general store. Jack bent down and picked up the small book, its cover worn smooth by what appeared to be years of handling. The August heat of 1878 Montana Territory made everything feel sluggish, but his fingers moved with sudden care as he recognized what he held. A diary was precious, personal. He glanced around the store, searching for whoever might have dropped it, but the aisles appeared empty save for old Mrs. Henderson examining bolts of calico near the front counter. He shouldn't open it. He knew that much. But the thing had fallen open in his hands to reveal delicate handwriting in dark ink, and his eyes caught a few words before he could stop himself. Sometimes I wonder if this dusty town will ever feel like home, or if I will always be the girl from Philadelphia who does not quite belong. Jack snapped the book shut, his weathered face coloring slightly. 26 years of cowboy life had taught him to respect people's privacy, even if curiosity gnawed at him like a wolf at a bone. He turned the diary over, looking for a name. On the inside cover, written in that same elegant script, he found it. Property of Sarah Jane Vaughn. If found, please return to the schoolhouse or Dr. Vaughn's residence. Dr. Vaughn. Jack knew him, of course. Everyone in Dillon knew the new doctor who had arrived 6 months ago with his daughter. The man had set up practice in a small building on Main Street and had already saved 3 lives that Jack knew of, including young Tommy Miller, who had been kicked by a horse. But Jack had never met the daughter, though he had heard she was teaching at the schoolhouse. He tucked the diary carefully into his shirt pocket, paid Mrs. Henderson for his supplies, and loaded his saddlebags onto his sorrel mare, Rosie. The schoolhouse was on his way out of town anyway, he reasoned. It would be no trouble to stop by. The late afternoon sun painted the wooden schoolhouse in shades of gold and amber. Jack tied Rosie to the hitching post and approached the building, removing his hat as he climbed the 3 steps to the door. Through the window, he could see a woman at the desk, bent over papers, her dark blonde hair pulled back in a practical bun, though several strands had escaped to frame her face. He knocked gently, and she looked up. Even from this distance, he could see her eyes were a startling green, bright against her sun-touched skin. She stood, smoothing her simple blue dress, and came to the door. "Can I help you?" Her voice was cultured, educated, but warm. Up close, Jack could see she was younger than he had expected, perhaps 22 or 23, with a spattering of freckles across her nose that her bonnet had failed to prevent. "I found this at the general store, madam." Jack pulled the diary from his pocket and held it out to her. "It fell from a shelf. I saw your name inside." Sarah's hand flew to her chest and her eyes widened. Oh, thank heavens. I have been looking everywhere for this. I thought I had lost it for good." She took the diary from him, clutching it to her chest like something precious. "I must have set it down when I was purchasing supplies this morning and completely forgot. Thank you so much, Mr. Vandermeer, Jack Vandermeer. I work at the Double R Ranch about 5 miles west of here." He twisted his hat in his hands, suddenly aware of how dusty and trail-worn he must look compared to her neat appearance. "Mr. Vandermeer, I cannot thank you enough. This diary, well, it contains thoughts that are very personal to me." A slight blush colored her cheeks. "I hope you did not read any of it." "No, madam." "Well, not intentionally. It fell open for just a moment, but I closed it right quick. I am sorry if I saw something I should not have." Sarah studied his face for a long moment, and Jack found himself unable to look away from those green eyes. There was intelligence there, and kindness, and something else he could not quite name. Loneliness, perhaps. "I believe you," she said finally, "and I appreciate your honesty, Most men might have read it and not admitted to it. She paused, then added, "Would you like to come in for a moment?" "I was just making some tea. It is the least I can do to thank you properly." Jack hesitated. He should get back to the ranch. There were chores waiting, horses to tend, but something in her expression, a hopefulness mixed with resignation, made him nod. "That would be kind of you, Miss Vaughn." She smiled, and it transformed her whole face. "Please come in." The schoolhouse was tidy, with rows of small desks facing a larger teacher's desk at the front. A blackboard covered one wall, still showing the remains of arithmetic problems. Books lined shelves along the windows, and children's drawings decorated the walls. In the corner, Sarah had set up a small table with a spirit lamp and tea things. "I often stay late to prepare lessons," she explained as she poured hot water over tea leaves in a blue ceramic pot. "My father works long hours at his practice, and our house feels rather empty during the day." She glanced at him as she poured tea into 2 cups. "How long have you been in Montana Territory, Mr. Vandermeer?" "All my life, madam." "I was born about 30 miles from here, on a homestead that did not quite make it. My parents passed when I was 16, and I have been working ranches ever since." He accepted the teacup, feeling awkward with the delicate china in his calloused hands. "I am sorry about your parents." Sarah sat down across from him, cradling her own cup. "My mother passed 2 years ago back in Philadelphia. That is when Father decided we needed a fresh start. He had always wanted to practice medicine on the frontier, and I wanted to escape the memories." "Dillon is a fair place for a fresh start," Jack said. "Hard living sometimes, but honest." "Yes, I am learning that." Sarah smiled slightly. "Though I confess, teaching in a one-room schoolhouse is quite different from the girls' academy where I taught in Philadelphia. Here, I have students ranging from 6 to 15, all with different needs and abilities. But I am growing to love it." They talked for nearly an hour, the conversation flowing more easily than Jack would have thought possible. Sarah told him about Philadelphia, about the society events she did not miss and the libraries she did. Jack found himself telling her about the ranch, about the satisfaction of working with horses, about the big sky country that he loved. The light was fading when Jack finally stood to leave. "I should get back. Thank you for the tea, Miss Vaughn." "Thank you again for returning my diary, Mr. Vandermeer." Sarah walked him to the door. "Perhaps I will see you in town again." "Perhaps so, madam." Jack settled his hat back on his head and untied Rosie. As he rode away, he could feel Sarah's eyes on his back, and something warm settled in his chest that had nothing to do with the tea. Over the following weeks, Jack found himself riding into Dillon more often than strictly necessary. He told himself it was just to pick up supplies or check on a saddle being repaired. But somehow his errands always seemed to time themselves to when school was letting out. He would tip his hat to Sarah as she stood on the schoolhouse steps, watching her students scatter to their homes, and she would smile and wave. One Saturday in early September, Jack worked up the courage to do more than tip his hat. Sarah was at the general store again, struggling with several heavy bags of supplies. "Let me help you with those, Miss Vaughn," Jack said, appearing at her elbow. Sarah looked up, startled, then smiled. "Mr. Vandermeer, that would be most welcome." "I fear I purchased more than I can easily carry." Jack gathered up the bags. "Where are we taking these?" "The schoolhouse. I am preparing for a special lesson on Monday." She fell into step beside him as they walked down the wooden sidewalk. "We are studying botany, and I want to create a small indoor garden so the children can observe plant growth." "That sounds mighty interesting. I do not recall having lessons like that when I was in school. Did you attend school here in Dillon?" "No, madam." "About 15 miles north, in a schoolhouse not much bigger than a shed. The teacher was Mrs. Patterson, who was about 100 years old and believed that education meant memorizing scripture and learning your sums. Cannot say I learned much about plants, except which ones the cattle should not eat. Sarah laughed, a bright sound that made Jack's heart do something strange in his chest. Well, I hope my students will remember their lessons more fondly. Though I must say, knowing which plants cattle should not eat seems quite practical. They reached the schoolhouse, and Jack carried the supplies inside, setting them on Sarah's desk. He should leave. He had already spent more time in town than he had planned. But he found himself lingering, watching as Sarah unpacked small clay pots and packets of seeds. "Miss Vaughn," he heard himself say, "I was wondering if you might like to go riding tomorrow afternoon. There is a place up in the hills, near the ranch, where the wildflowers are still blooming. It is real pretty, and if you are teaching botany, well, you might enjoy seeing them." Sarah's hand stilled on a packet of seeds. She looked up at him, her green eyes searching his face. "Are you asking to court me, Mr. Vandermeer?" Jack felt heat rise to his face, but he met her gaze steadily. "Yes, madam, I suppose I am, if that would be acceptable to you." A slow smile spread across Sarah's face. "I would like that very much, but you should know that you will need to ask my father's permission. He is quite old-fashioned about such things." "I would expect no less, madam." "Would this evening be a good time to call on him? Come to our house at 7 o'clock. We live in the White House behind the doctor's office, and Mr. Vandermeer, you may call me Sarah if I may call you Jack." "I would like that, Sarah." That evening, Jack bathed in the creek near the ranch bunkhouse, scrubbing trail dust from his skin and hair. He put on his cleanest shirt and pants, polished his boots until they gleamed, and borrowed a bit of bay rum from the ranch foreman, Pete Harrison. "Got yourself a girl, Vandermeer?" Pete asked with a grin. "Maybe. If her father does not shoot me first," Pete laughed. "That would be Dr. Vaughn. He seems a reasonable man, fixed up my hand last month when I caught it in a fence wire. Steady hands, calm manner, I think you will do fine." Jack was not so sure as he rode back into Dillon just before 7. The White House behind the doctor's office was neat and well-maintained, with curtains in the windows and a small garden out front. Jack tied Rosie to the fence post and approached the door, his heart hammering. Sarah answered his knock, wearing a dress of soft yellow that made her eyes look even greener. "Right on time," she said. "Please come in. Father is in the parlor." Dr. Vaughn was a tall, lean man in his early 50s, with graying hair and sharp blue eyes behind wire-rimmed spectacles. He stood as Jack entered, extending his hand. "Mr. Vandermeer, Sarah tells me you are the young man who returned her diary." "Yes, sir." Jack shook his hand, noting the firm grip. "That was good of you. Please sit down. Can I offer you coffee or whiskey?" "Coffee would be fine, sir." "Thank you." Sarah excused herself to make the coffee, leaving the two men alone. Dr. Vaughn settled back in his chair, studying Jack with a physician's assessing gaze. "My daughter also tells me you wish to court her." "Yes, sir, if you will permit it." "Tell me about yourself, Mr. Vandermeer. Sarah is my only child, and her welfare is my primary concern." Jack laid out his life plainly and honestly. He told Dr. Vaughn about his parents' homestead, their deaths, his years working various ranches. He explained his current position at the Double R Ranch, where he was head wrangler with a steady salary. He admitted he did not have much saved, but he was a hard worker and he lived honestly. "I know I am just a cowboy, sir," Jack finished. "I cannot offer Sarah the kind of life she had in Philadelphia, but I can promise to treat her with respect and to work hard to provide for her." Dr. Vaughn was quiet for a moment. "Do you know why we left Philadelphia, Mr. Vandermeer?" Sarah mentioned it was for a fresh start, sir. after her mother passed. That is part of it, but the whole truth is that Sarah was engaged to a young man back there, a banker's son from a good family. On paper, he was everything a father could want for his daughter, but he was cruel. He belittled Sarah, tried to control her, wanted her to be some decorative thing to show off to his friends. When she finally broke the engagement, there was a scandal. It seemed easier to leave. Sarah returned with the coffee, her cheeks flushed. "Father, you do not need to tell him all that." "Yes, I do." Dr. Vaughn accepted a cup of coffee. "I want Mr. Vandermeer to understand that I do not care about his bank account or his social standing. I care about his character. Sarah has had enough of men who look good on the surface but are rotten underneath." Jack looked at Sarah, saw the embarrassment in her face, and felt a surge of anger at the man who had hurt her. "I am sorry you went through that, Sarah." She met his eyes and smiled slightly. "Thank you, but it is in the past now." Dr. Vaughn set down his coffee cup. "Mr. Vandermeer, I am going to give you permission to court my daughter on one condition." "Yes, sir." "That you do it properly. No sneaking around, no impropriety. You may take Sarah riding or walking, but always in daylight and in public view. You will have her home at a reasonable hour. And if your intentions become serious, you will come to me first before speaking to her. Do we have an understanding?" "Yes, sir, absolutely." "Good." Dr. Vaughn stood and extended his hand again. "Then I wish you both well. Sarah, do not stay out too late tomorrow." "I will not, Father." Sarah walked Jack to the door. On the porch, she touched his arm lightly. "Thank you for being honest with him, and for not being put off by my history." "Everyone has a history, Sarah. It is what we do going forward that matters." Jack took her hand briefly, squeezing it. "I will come for you tomorrow at 2 o'clock if that suits you." "That suits me perfectly." The next afternoon was clear and beautiful, with a hint of autumn coolness in the air. Jack arrived promptly at 2 with Rosie and a gentle mare named Daisy that he had borrowed from the ranch. Sarah came out wearing a sensible riding skirt and jacket, her hair in a thick braid down her back. "I hope you know how to ride," Jack said, suddenly worried. "I should have asked. I learned as a girl. My uncle had a farm outside Philadelphia where I spent summers." Sarah approached Daisy confidently, letting the mare sniff her hand before stroking her neck. "Hello, beautiful girl. Are you going to take good care of me today?" They rode out of town and into the hills, following a trail that Jack knew well. The conversation came easily again, flowing from one topic to another. Sarah told him about her students, about the challenges and joys of teaching. Jack told her about the horses he was training, about the satisfaction of working with an animal until you understood each other without words. The meadow Jack had mentioned was about an hour's ride into the hills, a small valley cupped between two ridges. Wildflowers still bloomed there in profusion: purple asters, golden black-eyed Susans, white yarrow, and the last of the summer lupines. Sarah dismounted and walked among the flowers, her face alight with wonder. "Oh, Jack, this is beautiful. I have never seen anything like it." Jack watched her, thinking that she was more beautiful than any flower. The afternoon sun caught in her hair, turning it to gold and copper. Her laughter as a butterfly landed on her hand was the sweetest sound he had ever heard. They spread a blanket near a small creek that ran through the meadow and shared the lunch Sarah had packed: fried chicken, biscuits, apple cake. They talked and laughed, and Jack felt something unfurling in his chest, something that had been locked away for a long time. "Why did you never marry?" Sarah asked suddenly. "You are 26, you said. Most men out here marry younger than that." Jack was quiet for a moment, watching the water tumble over smooth stones. "I guess I never met the right woman. Ranch life is hard, and it takes a special person to love it. I have known girls who thought they wanted to be a rancher's wife, but they did not understand what that meant. The isolation, the hard work, the uncertainty. I did not want to marry someone who would end up resenting the life. And what kind of woman do you think could love that life? Someone strong. Someone who can find beauty in simple things. Someone who does not need fancy society or entertainments to be happy. He looked at her. Someone like you, maybe. Sarah blushed. You hardly know me, Jack. I know enough. I know you left behind everything comfortable and familiar to come out here with your father. I know you teach children in a one-room schoolhouse and find joy in it. I know you carry a diary full of your private thoughts and were not angry with me when I accidentally saw a bit of them. I know that you are kind and brave and beautiful, and I would like to know more. Sarah reached out and took his hand, lacing her fingers through his. I would like that too. They rode back to town as the sun was setting, painting the sky in shades of orange and pink. At Sarah's door, Jack helped her dismount, his hands lingering at her waist perhaps a moment longer than necessary. Thank you for today, Sarah said softly. It was wonderful. Can I see you again? Maybe next Sunday. I would like that. We could go to church together if you would like. And perhaps have dinner with my father afterward. That sounds perfect. As Jack rode back to the ranch that night, his heart was full in a way it had never been before. Pete took one look at his face and grinned. I take it things went well. Better than well, Pete. I think I am in love. The weeks that followed were the happiest Jack had ever known. Every Sunday, he rode into town for church with Sarah and her father. Afterward, they would have dinner at the Vaughn house, and Sarah would walk with Jack around town before he rode back to the ranch. On weekdays, he would stop by the schoolhouse when he could, always finding some excuse. He was passing through, he had a question about something. He happened to have picked some wildflowers that she might like for her classroom. Sarah welcomed his visits, her face lighting up whenever she saw him. The children quickly grew accustomed to the tall cowboy who sometimes appeared at their schoolhouse door, and they would giggle and whisper when their teacher would blush and smile. In late October, the first snow fell. Jack arrived at the schoolhouse one afternoon to find Sarah struggling to split wood for the stove. Here, let me do that, he said, taking the axe from her hands. I can manage, Sarah protested, but she stepped back and let him work. Jack made quick work of the wood, splitting enough to last several days. As he stacked it near the stove, he said, Sarah, this is too much for you to do alone. Why do not the children's fathers take turns providing wood? Some of them do when they can. But many of the families are struggling, and I do not want to be a burden. Sarah brushed sawdust from her skirt. Besides, I need to learn to do these things for myself. You do not have to do everything alone, Sarah. That is what I am trying to tell you. Jack set down the last piece of wood and turned to face her. I want to be here for you, not just sometimes, but always. Sarah looked up at him, her eyes wide. Jack, I know it has only been a few months. I know I should wait longer, be more patient. But Sarah, I love you. I think I have loved you since that first day when you smiled at me in this schoolhouse. I want to marry you if you will have me. Oh, Jack, Sarah's eyes filled with tears. I love you too. I have been so afraid to say it, to feel it after what happened before, but you are nothing like him. You are good and kind and steady, and yes, I will marry you. Jack pulled her into his arms, holding her close, breathing in the scent of her hair. I need to ask your father properly. I promised him I would. He will say yes. He already loves you like a son. Sarah pulled back enough to look up at him. But Jack, are you certain? I know how to teach, but I do not know the first thing about ranch life. I might be terrible at it. You will learn, and I will teach you just like you taught yourself to split wood. We will figure it out together. He cupped her face in his hands. All I need is you, Sarah. Everything else we can work out. That evening, Jack spoke to Dr. Vaughn. The older man listened carefully, asked a few questions about Jack's plans and prospects, and then smiled. "I was wondering when you would ask. You have my blessing, Jack, and my gratitude for loving my daughter the way she deserves to be loved." They were married in December in the small church in Dillon. Sarah wore her mother's wedding dress, altered to fit her smaller frame. Jack wore a new suit that he had saved 3 months' wages to buy. Dr. Vaughn walked Sarah down the aisle, tears streaming down his face. Pete Harrison stood as Jack's best man, and Sarah's students filled the church, grinning and whispering. The ceremony was simple but beautiful. When the minister said, "You may kiss your bride," Jack took Sarah in his arms and kissed her gently, reverently, as if she were something precious and breakable. The church erupted in cheers and applause. They spent their wedding night in a hotel in Dillon, a luxury Jack had saved for. In the morning, they would ride out to the ranch, where Jack had prepared a small cabin for them. But that night belonged just to them, to whispered words and gentle touches, to the discovery of each other. The next morning they rode out to the Double R Ranch together. Sarah sat behind Jack on Rosie, her arms wrapped around his waist, her head resting against his back. The December air was cold, but Sarah did not complain. The cabin Jack had prepared was small but sturdy, with a stone fireplace and real glass windows. He had built most of it himself over the past 2 months, working every spare moment. Inside there was a bed with a real mattress, a table and chairs, a cookstove and shelves for books and belongings. It was not fancy, but it was clean and warm and theirs. "Oh, Jack," Sarah breathed, looking around. "You built this." Pete helped with the roof, and some of the other boys helped with the heavy lifting. "But mostly, yes, I wanted you to have a real home, not just a bunk in the ranch house." Sarah threw her arms around him. "It is perfect. Absolutely perfect." The first months of their marriage were an adjustment. Sarah had to learn to cook on a wood stove, to manage a household with no servants, to live in relative isolation. There were days when she burned dinner or struggled with laundry or felt overwhelmed by the sheer amount of work involved in ranch life. But Jack was patient. He taught her what he could and never made her feel foolish for not knowing. And Sarah was determined. She had never been afraid of hard work, and she refused to let ranch life defeat her. She also continued teaching, riding into town 3 days a week for school. Jack worried about her making the journey alone, but Sarah insisted. "The children need me," she said firmly, "and I need them. Teaching gives me purpose, Jack. Please do not ask me to give it up." So Jack did not. Instead, he taught her to handle a rifle in case of trouble on the road. He made sure she always had a good horse. And on the days when the weather was bad, he rode with her, waiting at the general store until school let out so he could escort her home. Spring came, and with it, new life. The mares foaled, the grass turned green, and Sarah discovered she was pregnant. Jack was overjoyed, already imagining a son or daughter with Sarah's green eyes and quick mind. But Sarah was terrified. "What if something goes wrong?" she whispered one night, her hand on her still flat stomach. "My mother died in childbirth, Jack. What if I do too?" "You will not." Jack pulled her close. "Your father is the best doctor in the territory. He will take care of you, and I will be right there with you, every moment. You cannot promise that nothing will go wrong." "No, I cannot. But I can promise that I will love you and this baby with everything I have. And I can promise that your father will do everything in his power to keep you safe." He kissed her forehead. "Have faith, Sarah. We have come this far together. We will make it through this too." Sarah taught through the spring and into early summer, finally stopping when she was 6 months along, and the ride into town became too uncomfortable. Her father visited often, checking on her health and bringing medical supplies. He assured Jack that Sarah was strong and healthy, that there was no reason to expect complications. The baby came in late August, almost exactly a year after Jack had first found Sarah's diary. The labor was long and difficult, lasting nearly 20 hours. Jack paced outside the cabin, his stomach churning with fear every time he heard Sarah cry out. Dr. Vaughn worked steadily, his face calm but focused. Finally, just as the sun was rising, a baby's cry split the air. Jack rushed to the door as Dr. Vaughn appeared, grinning despite his exhaustion. "You have a son, Jack, and Sarah is fine. Tired, but fine." Jack pushed past him into the cabin. Sarah lay on the bed, pale and drenched with sweat but smiling. In her arms was a tiny bundle, red-faced and squalling. "Jack, meet your son." Sarah's voice was hoarse but filled with wonder. Jack approached slowly, afraid he might break something. He looked down at the tiny face, the impossibly small fingers curled into fists, and felt his heart expand until he thought it might burst. "He is perfect. Sarah, he is absolutely perfect. Would you like to hold him?" Jack had handled newborn foals and calves, but this was different. This was his son, his and Sarah's. He took the baby carefully, cradling him against his chest. The baby stopped crying and looked up at him with dark, unfocused eyes. "Hello, little one," Jack whispered. "I am your papa, and I promise I am going to do everything I can to give you a good life." They named him James after Jack's father, James Vandermeer. Jack liked the sound of it, strong and solid. Life with a baby was exhausting but joyful. James was a good baby, healthy and strong. Sarah took to motherhood with the same determination she brought to everything else, though she admitted to Jack that there were days when she felt overwhelmed. "I love him so much it frightens me," she confessed one night as they lay in bed, James sleeping peacefully in his cradle nearby. "When I think about all the things that could happen to him, all the ways the world could hurt him, I can barely breathe." "I know," Jack said. "I feel the same way, but we cannot protect him from everything, Sarah. All we can do is love him and teach him and trust that it will be enough." When James was 6 months old, Sarah started talking about going back to teaching. Jack was hesitant, worried about how she would manage both teaching and caring for a baby. But Sarah had a solution. "I will take James with me. He is still nursing, so he needs to be with me anyway. I can set up a cradle in the schoolhouse. The older girls can help watch him during lessons. It will be good for the children to learn about caring for babies." Jack was not entirely convinced, but he knew better than to try to stop Sarah once she had made up her mind. And it worked surprisingly well. The children loved having a baby in the classroom. They took turns rocking his cradle and making him laugh. James seemed to thrive on the attention, becoming a happy, social baby. 2 years passed in a blur of work and love and laughter. James grew into a sturdy toddler with Jack's dark hair and Sarah's green eyes. He learned to walk chasing chickens around the yard, took his first steps into Jack's waiting arms. His first word was "Papa," much to Sarah's mock dismay. "I am the one who carried him for 9 months and feed him and change him, and his first word is Papa," she said, but she was smiling. Jack grinned. "What can I say? The boy has good taste." In the spring of James's 2nd year, Sarah discovered she was pregnant again. This time, she was not as frightened. She knew what to expect, knew that she could survive it. The pregnancy was easier than the first, and when the baby came in December, the labor was shorter. This time, it was a girl. They named her Caroline after Sarah's mother. Caroline was smaller than James had been, more delicate, with wisps of blonde hair and blue eyes like her grandfather. "She is beautiful," Jack whispered, holding his daughter for the first time. "Just like her mother." Sarah, exhausted but happy, smiled. "We are going to have our hands full with 2 of them. Good thing we are a team." The years rolled on, each one bringing new challenges and joys. James grew tall and strong, following Jack around the ranch, learning to ride and rope and gentle horses. Caroline was quieter, more introspective, preferring to stay close to Sarah, learning to read and write almost before she could walk properly. Jack prospered at the Double R Ranch. His skill with horses was unmatched, and when the original owner decided to sell, Jack had saved enough to buy a partnership in the ranch with Pete Harrison. Sarah continued teaching, taking both children with her to the schoolhouse. It was unconventional, but it worked for them. When James was 6 and Caroline 4, Sarah stopped teaching to focus on the ranch and the children. But she did not stop educating. She homeschooled both children, instilling in them a love of learning that went beyond what any one-room schoolhouse could provide. Jack watched his family grow and thrive, and sometimes he could hardly believe this was his life. On quiet evenings, he would sit on the porch of their cabin, now expanded to include 2 more rooms, and watch Sarah play with the children in the yard. His heart would swell with gratitude for the day he had found a diary in the general store and made the decision to return it. One evening, when James was 8 and Caroline 6, Sarah sat beside Jack on the porch after the children had gone to bed. She rested her head on his shoulder, sighing contentedly. "What are you thinking about?" Jack asked, putting his arm around her. "How much my life has changed since we left Philadelphia. If someone had told me back then that I would be living on a ranch in Montana, married to a cowboy with 2 children and dirt under my fingernails, I would have thought they were insane." She laughed softly. "But I cannot imagine my life any other way now. This is where I belong. With you." Jack kissed the top of her head. "I found more than a diary that day in the general store. I found my future. I found you. Do you ever wonder what would have happened if you had not returned it, if you had just left it there or thrown it away? No, because I could never have done that. It was not mine to keep, and maybe that is why things worked out the way they did, because we both believe in doing the right thing, even when it is not the easy thing." Sarah was quiet for a moment, then said, "I want to show you something." She stood and went into the cabin, returning a moment later with a familiar leather-bound book. Her diary. Jack had not seen it since that first day. "You still have it, of course. It is how we met." Sarah opened it to a page marked with a ribbon. "I want to read you what I wrote the day you returned it to me." Jack listened as Sarah read in the fading light. "A cowboy came to the schoolhouse today and returned my diary. I do not know why I left it at the general store, but I am grateful that I did. His name is Jack Vandermeer, and he has the kindest eyes I have ever seen. When he handed me the diary, he apologized for accidentally reading a line or two. Most men would not have admitted that. Most men would not have returned it at all. I invited him in for tea, and we talked for an hour. It is strange, but I felt more comfortable with him than I have felt with anyone since Mother died. Like I could say anything and he would not judge me. Is this foolish? I hardly know him, but I hope I see him again." Sarah closed the diary, her eyes shining with tears. "I knew even then. Something in my heart recognized you, Jack." Jack pulled her close, his own eyes damp. "I knew too. I told myself I was just being neighborly, returning lost property. But the truth is, I could not stop thinking about you. You were in my head and in my heart from that very first moment." They sat in comfortable silence as the stars came out, the vast Montana sky spreading above them. Inside the cabin, their children slept peacefully. Around them, the ranch settled into nighttime quiet, and Jack thought about all the small moments and decisions that had led them to this place. Finding the diary, returning it instead of ignoring it, having the courage to ask Sarah riding, asking for her hand in marriage, building this life together, piece by piece, day by day, The next morning, James burst into the cabin while Jack and Sarah were making breakfast. "Papa, Mama, one of the mares is having her baby." Jack and Sarah exchanged glances, then Jack said, "Well, let us go see. Sarah, you coming?" "Absolutely." Sarah wiped her hands on her apron. "Caroline, would you like to see the foal being born?" Caroline nodded eagerly, and the whole family trooped out to the barn. The mare, a beautiful chestnut named Bella, was indeed in labor. Jack examined her quickly and determined everything was progressing normally. "Can we watch, Papa?" James asked, his eyes wide with excitement. "You can, but you need to be quiet and stay back. Bella needs space to do what she needs to do." They watched as nature took its course. The foal emerged, a miracle of long legs and damp coat. Bella immediately began cleaning her baby, nickering softly. Within minutes, the foal was attempting to stand, wobbling on impossibly thin legs. "Is it a boy or a girl, Papa?" Caroline whispered. Jack checked. "It is a girl, a filly." "Can I name her?" James asked. "What would you name her?" James thought for a moment. "Hope. Because that is what Mama always says, that where there is life, there is hope." Jack looked at Sarah, who had tears running down her face. "I think that is a perfect name, son. Hope it is." As the children continued to watch the new foal with wonder, Jack put his arm around Sarah. "You are crying. Are you all right?" "I am more than all right. I am happy." Sarah leaned into him. "Do you remember what I wrote in that diary entry you accidentally read, about wondering if Dylan would ever feel like home?" "I remember. It is home now. Not because of the town, but because of you and the children and this life we have built. You gave me that, Jack. You gave me a home." "We gave it to each other," Jack corrected gently. The years continued to flow like a river, bringing both calm stretches and rapids. When James was 12, he helped Jack break his first horse, a spirited young gelding that no one else could handle. Jack watched with pride as his son gentled the horse with patience and understanding, using the techniques Jack had taught him. Caroline, at 10, was already teaching younger children to read, holding informal classes at the ranch for the children of the cowboys who worked there. She had Sarah's gift for education and Jack's quiet steadiness. When James turned 16, he asked Jack if he could start working on the ranch full-time instead of continuing with his studies. Sarah was initially opposed, wanting him to pursue more education, perhaps even go to college back east. But Jack understood his son's heart. "Let him work with me for a year," Jack said to Sarah one night. "If he still feels the same way, then we let him follow his heart. But if he changes his mind, we will send him to school, no matter what it costs." Sarah agreed, though reluctantly. But as the year progressed, it became clear that James had inherited Jack's love for horses and ranch life. He was good at it, with an instinct for animals that could not be taught. At the end of the year, Sarah gave her blessing for him to stay. Caroline was different. At 16, she announced that she wanted to go to college to become a teacher like Sarah. This time, Jack and Sarah were united in their support, though Jack worried about sending his daughter so far away. "She needs to do this, Jack," Sarah said. "We raised her to think for herself, to pursue her dreams. We cannot hold her back now because we are afraid." So they sent Caroline to a women's college in Denver, the closest city with a good teaching program. The house felt empty without her bright chatter, but her letters came regularly, full of excitement about her studies and new experiences. The years passed. James married a rancher's daughter named Emma, a practical, kind girl who loved ranch life as much as he did. They built a house on the far side of the property and started their own family. Jack became a grandfather at 48, and the joy of holding his first grandchild was almost as intense as holding his own children had been. Caroline returned from college with her teaching certificate, and a young man named Robert, a lawyer she had met in Denver. Robert was city-bred but willing to learn, and Jack saw how he looked at Caroline with pure adoration. He gave his blessing for the marriage, and Caroline and Robert settled in Dillon, where Caroline took over the schoolhouse from the aging teacher who had replaced Sarah years before. Jack and Sarah grew older together, their hair turning gray, their faces lining with age and experience. But their love never dimmed. If anything, it deepened, tempered by years of working together, raising children together, weathering storms together. On their 30th wedding anniversary, Jack took Sarah back to the meadow where they had their first ride together. It was autumn again, the flowers long gone, replaced by golden grass and red leaves. They spread a blanket and sat together, watching the sun set over the mountains. "You have any regrets?" Jack asked, taking Sarah's hand. Sarah was quiet for a moment, then shook her head. "Not a single one." "Oh, there are things I might have done differently, mistakes I would not make again. But regrets? No. Every choice I made led me here, to you, to our children and grandchildren, to this life. How could I regret any of that? I love you, Sarah. More today than the day we married, though I did not think that was possible. I love you too, Jack. You know what I think about sometimes? That diary. If I had not left it at the general store, if you had not found it, if you had not been the kind of man who would return it. Our whole life together hung on those small moments. I think we would have found each other anyway, Jack said. Maybe not as quickly, but eventually. Some things are just meant to be. As they rode back to the ranch in the gathering twilight, Jack thought about all the years stretching behind them and the years still to come. He thought about finding that diary, about Sarah's face when he returned it, about every moment that had followed. The ranch was thriving now, expanded and prosperous. James ran most of the day-to-day operations, leaving Jack free to work with the horses he loved. Sarah spent her days tending her garden, reading, visiting with their grandchildren. They had 4 grandchildren now, with another on the way. The family gathered every Sunday for dinner, filling their home with noise and laughter. When Jack turned 55, he started teaching his oldest grandson, James's boy Daniel, to work with horses. Daniel was 7, the same age Jack had been when his own father taught him to ride. Watching the boy's face light up when a horse responded to him, Jack saw the circle continuing, the legacy passing on. Sarah still kept her diary, though she wrote in it less frequently now. Sometimes Jack would see her with it on the porch, writing carefully, her face thoughtful. He never asked what she wrote. That was her private space, as it had always been. One evening when Jack was 58 and Sarah 55, they sat on their porch as they had done countless times before. Inside, they could hear Emma and Caroline preparing dinner while the grandchildren played. James and Robert were in the barn, checking on a mare about to foal. "You ever think about Philadelphia?" Jack asked. "About what your life would have been like if you had stayed?" Sarah shook her head. "That girl who lived in Philadelphia feels like someone else entirely. Someone I knew a long time ago but do not really remember being. This is who I am now, who I was meant to be. A rancher's wife, a mother, a grandmother. Your wife." Jack pulled her close, and she rested her head on his shoulder as she had done so many times before. They sat in comfortable silence, watching the sun paint the sky in shades of orange and pink. The mountains stood eternal in the distance, the same mountains that had witnessed their courtship, their marriage, the birth of their children. "Jack," Sarah's voice was soft. "Yes. Thank you for finding my diary. Thank you for being the kind of man who would return it. Thank you for all of this." She gestured to the ranch, the house, the family gathered inside. "Thank you for inviting me in for tea that day. Thank you for taking a chance on a cowboy who did not have much to offer except his heart. Your heart was all I ever needed." As the stars began to emerge in the vast Montana sky, Jack thought about the journey they had traveled together. From a chance encounter in a schoolhouse to this moment, surrounded by the family and life they had built together. He thought about every challenge they had faced, every joy they had shared, every ordinary day that had woven together into an extraordinary life. Inside the house, someone called them for dinner. Jack stood and helped Sarah to her feet, and hand in hand, they walked inside to join their family. The table was crowded and noisy, full of love and laughter. Jack looked around at the faces gathered there. His children and grandchildren, his son-in-law and daughter-in-law. All of them here because he had found a diary in a general store 30 years ago and made the choice to return it. He caught Sarah's eye across the table, and she smiled at him, that same smile that had captured his heart the first time he saw it. And Jack knew with absolute certainty that he would make the same choice again, every time without hesitation. Because that choice had led him here, to this moment, to this life, to this love that had endured and grown stronger with each passing year. After dinner, as the family lingered over coffee and pie, Daniel climbed into Jack's lap. "Grandpa, will you tell us a story?" "What kind of story?" "A love story," Caroline's daughter Grace piped up. "Tell us how you and Grandma met." Jack glanced at Sarah, who smiled and nodded. "All right, but it is a pretty simple story. Your grandmother lost something precious, and I found it and returned it to her." "What did she lose?" Daniel asked. "A diary. A little leather-bound book where she wrote her thoughts and dreams." "And you brought it back to her?" Grace's eyes were wide. "I did, because it was not mine to keep. And when I returned it to her, she invited me in for tea and we talked, and I fell in love with her right then and there." "Did Grandma fall in love with you too?" Daniel wanted to know. Sarah laughed. "Not right away, but pretty quickly. Your grandfather was very persistent." "What does that mean?" "It means he kept showing up," Sarah explained. "He found reasons to come to the schoolhouse where I taught. He asked my father permission to court me. He took me riding and brought me flowers and made me laugh. And slowly, I realized that I loved him too." "And then you got married and lived happily ever after," Grace said. "Well, we got married," Jack said. "But happily ever after is not something that just happens. It is something you work for every single day. Your grandmother and I built our life together, piece by piece. We had happy times and hard times, but we faced them all together." James, listening from across the table, said, "That is good advice, Papa. I hope Emma and I can have what you and Mama have." "You will, son. You are already well on your way." As the evening wound down and families departed for their own homes, Jack and Sarah were finally alone again. Sarah began clearing the table, but Jack stopped her. "Leave it. It can wait until morning. Come sit with me." They went out to the porch one more time, wrapped in a quilt against the autumn chill. The stars blazed overhead, countless and bright. "You think we will have many more years like this?" Sarah asked quietly. "All of us together, healthy and happy, I hope so. But whatever time we have, we will make the most of it." Jack tightened his arm around her. "That is all anyone can do." Sarah was quiet for a moment, then said, "I want to read you something. Wait here." She went inside and returned with her diary, the same leather-bound book Jack had found all those years ago. The cover was more worn now, the pages yellowed with age. Sarah opened it to the last entry and read by the light streaming from the window. 30 years ago today, a cowboy walked into my life and changed everything. I thought I knew what love was, but I did not. Not really. Love is not the dramatic gestures or the sweep of passion, though we had that too. Love is choosing each other every single day. It is building a life together, brick by brick, day by day. It is facing hardships together and celebrating joys together. It is growing old together and still feeling your heart skip when he smiles at you. Jack Vandermeer found my diary and returned it, but in doing so, he gave me so much more. He gave me a home, a family, a purpose, a life beyond anything I could have imagined. He gave me everything. And I would do it all again exactly the same way just to end up here in his arms under these Montana stars. Sarah closed the diary, tears streaming down her face. Jack pulled her close, his own eyes wet. You gave me everything too, Sarah, everything that matters. They held each other under the stars. Two people who had found each other against all odds and built a love that had endured through 3 decades, and would endure for whatever time they had left. The diary that had brought them together sat in Sarah's lap, a testament to the power of small choices and simple acts of kindness. Inside the house, the clock struck 10. Somewhere on the ranch, a horse nickered softly. The wind whispered through the grass, carrying the scent of autumn and the promise of winter to come. And Jack and Sarah sat together, content in the life they had created, grateful for every moment that had led them to this one. The years continued their steady march. Jack and Sarah grew older but no less devoted to each other. They celebrated their 35th anniversary, then their 40th. Their grandchildren grew, and great-grandchildren arrived. The ranch prospered under James's management, and Caroline's school became one of the best in the territory. When Montana became a state in 1889, Jack and Sarah celebrated with the whole town, watching the fireworks from their porch. They had seen the territory grow and change, had been part of shaping it into something lasting and good. Jack's hair turned fully white, and his hands, calloused by years of work, developed arthritis that made detailed work difficult. But he could still ride, still gentle a horse when needed. Sarah's eyes grew weaker, requiring spectacles for reading, but her mind remained sharp and her heart remained full. On a spring morning in 1893, Jack woke to find Sarah still sleeping beside him, her breathing peaceful and even. He watched her for a moment, this woman who had been his companion for 41 years, and felt a wave of gratitude so intense it brought tears to his eyes. How blessed he had been to find her, to love her, to build this life with her. Sarah stirred and opened her eyes, catching him watching her. "Good morning," she murmured, reaching for his hand. "Good morning, my love. What were you thinking about looking at me like that, just counting my blessings? And you are at the top of the list." Sarah smiled and squeezed his hand. "We have been very fortunate, have we not?" "More than fortunate. We have been blessed." They rose and dressed, ready to face another day together. Outside, they could hear James already at work, the sounds of the ranch waking up. Through the window, they saw Daniel, now a young man of 21, riding out to check the far pastures. Grace was in the garden, planting vegetables alongside her mother. Jack made coffee while Sarah prepared breakfast, moving around their kitchen in the synchronized dance of long marriage. They ate together on the porch, watching the sun rise over the mountains, painting the world in gold and rose. "What shall we do today?" Sarah asked. "I thought I might teach young Samuel to ride. He is 5 now, old enough to start learning." Samuel was their newest great-grandchild, James's grandson. "That sounds perfect, and I promised Grace I would help her with a new dress pattern. She wants to make something special for the summer social." It was an ordinary day, filled with ordinary tasks. But that was the beauty of their life together, Jack thought. The extraordinary love they shared made every ordinary day precious. That afternoon, while Jack was in the corral with Samuel, patiently teaching the boy to sit a horse, Sarah sat on the porch with her diary. She wrote slowly, carefully, recording the events of the day. When she finished, she sat back and looked at what she had written, then added one more line. "After all these years, after all we have been through, I would not change a single moment. This is my happily ever after, and it is more beautiful than any fairy tale." She closed the diary and set it aside, watching Jack with their great-grandson. Samuel was laughing, delighted, while Jack steadied him with gentle hands. The sound of that laughter carried on the spring breeze, mixing with the sounds of the ranch, the sounds of their family, the sounds of the life they had built together. As the sun began to set, painting the sky in brilliant colors, the family gathered for supper as they did every evening. The table was full, requiring extra chairs and place settings. 3 generations sat together, talking and laughing, sharing the events of their days. At the head of the table, Jack presided with quiet contentment. At the other end, Sarah watched her family with shining eyes. This was what they had built together, starting from a chance encounter in a general store so many years ago. A diary lost and found. A conversation over tea, a ride to see wildflowers. Every small moment had led to this, to a love that had grown and multiplied, creating new love, new life, new possibilities. As the evening wound down and the family dispersed to their own homes, Jack and Sarah stood at the doorway, waving goodbye. When the last wagon disappeared down the road, they turned to each other. "Another good day," Sarah said. "One of many, with many more to come, God willing," Jack replied. They walked back inside, hand in hand, ready for whatever tomorrow might bring, knowing they would face it together, as they had faced everything for the past 41 years. The diary sat on Sarah's desk, a silent witness to their journey, a reminder that the greatest adventures often begin with the smallest acts of kindness, and that true love is not found but built, day by day, choice by choice, moment by precious moment. And so their story continued, not with dramatic fanfare but with quiet contentment, with morning coffee and evening stars, with grandchildren's laughter and the steady rhythm of ranch life, with the enduring love of 2 people who had found each other against all odds and had chosen, every single day, to keep finding each other again and again. It was a simple story, really. A cowboy found a diary, returned it, and found his future. But in that simplicity lay a truth as vast as the Montana sky above them. That love, real love, is both the grandest adventure and the quietest comfort, and that happily ever after is not a destination but a journey traveled hand in hand with the one you love.